Well, absolutely. I mean, the doctrine of critical race theory explicitly says that there is no such thing as merit, as race neutral merit. It doesn't exist. So if you really buy into that, um, if you buy into that schema, then you basically put a lens on the world where there's no way to judge a person's competence independent of their race. You can't In this world, you can't give two kids a math test and say the one that scores 20 points higher is better at math. You cannot say that in this worldview, because those two kids have different backgrounds or different races, different levels of, they exist in the white kid exists in a society that's built for him and the black kid doesn't, right? That's the idea. And so there's no such thing as there's only merit, I guess, within each race. There's no merit. There's no measuring merit between races, which creates an enormous problem in an education system that has to, at some level, be responsive to merit. And if not, then at least the market will always be responsive to merit at some level. So people are in for a rude awakening if you try to get rid of merit from between the ages of 0 and 18, and then you get into the world, and lo and behold, merit matters. Merit matters to consumers, right? It matters to the market a great deal.
The demand is selfish. That's what people forget. Demand is very selfish. It wants the benefit, and it kind of doesn't care where the benefit is coming from. It wants the benefit at the lowest possible cost. And so it doesn't kind of matter. And that's why I've always claimed that the free market is probably the most inclusive institution of all, because it gives everybody a chance to satisfy this inherently selfish demand.
Yeah, I mean, Shelby Steele makes this point, which is a profound one, but it's also really obvious and right on the surface, is that in the Jim Crow era, during segregation, pretty much all desirable spaces of American society, the door was closed to black people. When those doors opened, all of those spaces were still incredibly racist in terms of their attitudes and prejudices, but the most merit-based of those, the prejudice had to melt away very quickly, right? So why is it that 3/4 of the NBA is now black people, right? The NBA used to be white. It was completely white, pretty much. And it was just forced by the meritocratic excellence of so many black basketball players to allow the league to become predominantly black, not because the powers that be were progressive in that era. No, they were all they were of the same caste as the rest of white American society that was fine keeping black people excluded. It's that sports is so meritocratic and so objective, and African Americans excelled to such a degree in this sport that it was quickly undeniable, right? And prejudice couldn't hold it back. So, I mean, that's an obvious example, but it goes to the point that merit really doesn't care what your skin color is. And, there's even, to even put a finer point on it, there was I think a famous study in Broward County, Florida, where they administered universal IQ testing, essentially, to children. I can't remember exactly what age, but maybe teen or preteen. And what they found is that doing universal IQ testing was very good, because you could identify poor black kids, poor Hispanic kids that were incredibly gifted, and track them to different programs based in a way that never would have been apparent from grades or teacher information alone, right? Because you don't really know what it means for a kid at a failing public school to have an A, right? We don't really know. There could be grade inflation. There could be a totally subjective judgment on the part of the teacher. But if you administer IQ testing to everyone, then you can identify and that's how someone like my mom, who grew up in the South Bronx, ended up at Stuyvesant, is because she was identified basically off of an IQ test. And so by getting rid of the idea that merit is important, the idea that an IQ test is meaningful, you basically forego the opportunity to identify all of those talented Black and Hispanic, those gifted students that could really have a bright future if they're identified at an early age.
It's really sad how we've lost the universalist assumptions of the civil rights movement, which the whole energy behind the fight against discrimination used to be this idea that merit is universal. And, some people from different racial backgrounds, different genders, different, however you want to break down society, individuals from all these different groups, even if those groups can be measured to be different as groups, individuals can transcend that. And individuals can actually be brilliant at math. And it's those individuals who are being kept back. And it's all of the contributions they can make to society that we lose when we have a system of discrimination. And the same thing, I would argue, also applies to character and values. There's the so-called father of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, did a cross-cultural study where he sort of analyzed the values of cultures from East and West, from dozens of different cultures. And he identified sort of 6 cultural universals, values that are universal across all different human groups. So for example, the value of courage or the value of justice. And then you have, of course, variations, but you do have people that are virtuous and that are meritorious in all these different groups. And it used to be part of the assumption of the civil rights movement that the reason we want to remove discrimination is in order to get these people contributing to society. Whereas today, it's almost as though we're just monomaniacally focused on, in the context of these programs, the DEI programs and so forth, monomaniacally focused on past discrimination and victimhood and, what can we do to redress? And this idea that we just have to keep discriminating in the other way. And we're losing this very universalist conception of mankind that people from different groups can transcend and can have very high character and can make all kinds of contributions to all kinds of different areas if we just allow them to.
Right. I think the other aspect of this that is never talked about is that people often support policies that benefit them because it benefits them, right? So, if you ask an American farmer if he supports subsidies for farmers, he's very likely to say, yes, I support giving money to me because no one ever says it. No one ever admits to the self-interest. No one ever says, yes, I support the subsidies to people like me because I like to get money, right? No one ever puts it that way. It's always glossed in moral terms. I support subsidies to farmers because farmers are the heartblood of this country and yada, yada, yada. And there may even be truth to those arguments, but no one will ever admit to the self-interest aspect. So even though it's universal, it's a human universal. So when it comes to DEI, when it comes to affirmative action, you very rarely hear someone say, well, yeah, I support DEI programs because I'm a Black man, and it directly benefits me. Like it leads me to get a higher paying job than I otherwise would, or it lead, and so forth. So, one has to admit that, like, to oppose these programs, you're never going to hear it from the horse's mouth that, the reason I've been supporting this and the reason we're always going to support it. There's going to be no end date is the point that I'm getting at with these policies. There's going to be no point at which people say, okay, it's been 200 years of DEI and affirmative action and racial preferences. I think we have sufficiently repaid what happened. That date is never going to come because it's always going to be in the self-interest of those who benefit from the policy to continue advocating for it.